Welcome to Soccer Morning on World Soccer Talk. Here's your host, Jason Davis. Good morning, everybody. Welcome into Soccer Morning here on a Monday. Hope your Monday is going well. I'm the type of person who needs a lot of coffee on a Monday morning. It was a jam-packed weekend full of soccer. Those are where my responsibilities lie. Maybe you've got, the wife and the kids, or the husband and the kids, or the job that sucks up a lot of your time. Just dreading getting up and going to work on Monday. But it's also, and I know that I'm talking to about, 95% of our audience when I say it's also USA-Mexico week, and that's got to get you jazzed a little bit. Whether you root for the United States or Mexico or neither, and you just enjoy the rivalry, it's fun. I don't know if it's a big match. I don't even know if it's going to mean anything. I think we all kind of recognize that this is a bit of a money grab on a Wednesday night in San Antonio, but it'll be fun. I don't know, resumption of hostilities, something. On today's program, we'll have Kyle McCarthy from Fox Soccer Inside MLS to review the MLS weekend. Plenty to talk about there. 4 teams can't score goals on the weekend, which, guys, stop. Like, MLS, please. We need a little bit. I'm not one of those people who says make the goal bigger, find a way to increase scoring. Americans don't like sports with low score. I'm not one of those people. I can be a traditionalist. I can get something out of a goalless game. But we need a little bit more scoring, people. Let's pick up the pace here. We'll talk to Kyle about that and other things on the MLS weekend. Colorado with a win, Philly with a win, Bill Hamid with a fumble, and DC United loses 2 points at home. LA beat Seattle last night. Good stuff there. Jeff Kassouf from Equalizer Soccer will join us to talk about the NWSL opening weekend at 10:40. So we'll go over all of the happenings in the National Women's Soccer League with one of the foremost experts, Jeff Kassouf. That should be a good discussion as well. And then the phone lines will be open after that. You can go ahead and mark down that phone number. Remember, we've changed it. It's slightly different. It's a lot different because it's different numbers. That's how it works. 646-832-3909 is the number. Call in later. Not now, later. I know it's confusing when I give the number out, but I don't ask you to call in now. Call in later. Headlines from the weekend: Manchester City loses to Manchester United, at Old Trafford 4-2 in the derby match. It looked like City was going to go and have some more success at Old Trafford the way it's been the last couple of seasons. I saw Jimmy Conrad with a clever tweet and said, hey, maybe City should consider playing their games at Old Trafford. They've done pretty well there the last couple of years. And then Manchester United decided to kick it into high gear. It was raining. It was typical English football weather, and Manchester United, the old hands, put on a bit of a show. In the aftermath, Manuel Pellegrini accepting some blame for the performance. Doesn't want to talk about his future yet, but this is the thing that's going to happen with City. When they fail to reach their goals, and look, they won a title last year. They've got 2 in a couple of seasons now. It's not as though they've been a failure with this project. But as we've seen, when they fail in Europe, already out, now that they're going to miss out on the title and Chelsea's going to walk away with it, Manuel Pellegrini's job is going to be under question. I understand he doesn't want to talk about it immediately after this game, but he also said, hey, the season's gone in the trash, and here we are. Meanwhile, Louis van Gaal, look at this story, is out partying after the game with players from the Manchester City women's team. Manchester City women's winger Toni Duggan posted a photo of herself with United boss Louis van Gaal. The Instagram picture showed a smiling Van Gaal posing for a celebratory selfie with Duggan and fellow City teammate Isabel Christensen, as well as Everton player Michelle Hennigan. What? And then apparently Duggan had to delete the picture because City fans were pissed off. You think? I mean, you want to go hang out with Louis van Gaal. He's a legend. He's got a track record a mile long for winning titles in the game you play, fine. But you should know better. You really should know better than put it on Instagram. Don't put it out there into the world. Go have a drink with him. Pick his brain. Come on. Halftime of the LA-Seattle game last night in MLS, we got the roster for the Wednesday friendly that I mentioned against Mexico from the United States. Jurgen Klinsmann making some, expected choices with a couple of wrinkles. Not a lot of width in the midfield, but you do have a couple of interesting names popping up. Lee Nguyen back in the team, and Miguel Ibarra in this team again. You look at the forwards with Josie Altidore ruled out through that red card he picked up in Switzerland. Juan Agudelo is back in this team. Julian Green is back in this team. Jordan Morris, the kid from Stanford, the discussion buster. I don't know how else to describe Jordan Morris. When Jurgen Klinsmann talks about how he needs these players to be challenging themselves at the highest level, and he goes and picks Jordan Morris, I don't know what to make of it. I don't know if he's trolling us. I'm sure Jordan Morris is a very good player. I've talked to some people who know this game inside and out, and they say he's going to be a good player. But to keep calling him into the senior national team is just an odd choice, considering the other things, the other mantras of Jurgen Klinsmann in charge while he's been in charge of the U.S. national team. Now, obviously, this is a team limited by the fact this is not a FIFA window. He doesn't have the option to take players from their clubs without their clubs releasing them. DeAndre Yedlin gets a release the same week, a couple of days after, or a day after, he makes his Tottenham debut. That's an interesting thing for Tottenham to do, and it's an interesting thing for Jurgen Klinsmann to do, to have him fly all the way across the Atlantic to play in a game, fly all the way back and try to get back into the Spurs team and build on his debut. Chicharito Hernandez scored his first goal in almost 6 months in a 3-0 win for Real Madrid over Eibar this weekend. Cristiano Ronaldo also scored in that game. And by virtue of Barcelona's 2-2 draw with Sevilla, Madrid is now only 2 points back in La Liga, so it's getting a little tight. Barcelona did not finish out their match. They're paying for that. From ESPN, when Barcelona were up 2-0 through Lionel Messi and Neymar with just 30 minutes to play at Sevilla on Saturday night, they seemed set to take a giant step towards sealing this season's La Liga title. They didn't. Mistakes from Claudio Bravo and Gerard Piqué allowed Sevilla to draw 2-2 and allowed second-place Real Madrid to move within just 2 points of the top. Luis Enrique lamenting his team's inability to control that game, and that's not something you normally talk about with Barcelona. When we talk about Barcelona, you talk about controlling a game and maybe not killing the game off in the way that most of the teams around the world have to do that, which is sitting back, packing it in, playing a lot of defensive soccer. Typically, they close out a game. They choke it. They choke a game by controlling the ball. But when you make mistakes, and every team is prone to mistakes at some point, you have the opportunity to lose points. And now things are getting tight in La Liga. Back to the Premier League for just a second. Chelsea wins 1-0 at QPR. While celebrating the winning goal, Branislav Ivanovic was hit by a lighter thrown. Did I say Branislav? Yeah, get his name right. Hit by a lighter thrown from the stand, so the FA will open an inquiry into that little situation. I don't understand people throwing things. I never will. I don't know. There's really no other way to say it. How stupid are you if you're throwing things from the stands? I don't care if it's a cup of soda or a lighter or a coin or bags of urine. The fact that you're throwing things from the stands, just reprehensible, incomprehensible. I don't understand it. But hey, this is the passionate game that we all love. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, Kyle McCarthy will join us from Fox Soccer. We'll talk to him about the MLS weekend and the storylines therein. Don't go anywhere. Soccer Morning, WorldSoccerTalk.com.
Face in the crowd, you're talking too loud.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on World Soccer Talk with Jason Davis.
Here we go, back on Soccer Morning, talking a little MLS from the weekend with Kyle McCarthy from Fox Soccer Inside MLS. By the way, I discovered that if you go to InsideMLS.com, it redirects you properly. I typed it in, Kyle, not thinking straight, and then I was like, oh, that's not going to... Oh, it does work. That's very nice.
No, it's funny. I try and make it as easy as possible for people to visit the website.
There you go. That's the name of the game. Kyle J. McCarthy on Twitter. If you're not following, you should be. Kyle, you look around the league this weekend, a couple of interesting things happened. I'm going to go with Colorado and give them some love. 4-0 win over FC Dallas on Friday. I don't know if that's a result out of nowhere because this is MLS, but certainly considering the fact that the Rapids hadn't scored yet in 2015, for them to drop 4 on a team that we think is pretty good in FC Dallas has got to be a surprise.
It's a surprise, certainly. And Colorado deserved the goal at some point during the opening weeks of the season. They had done enough to score, and somehow they hadn't managed it. And the absence of Matt Hedges was a big deal in that game. And Colorado exploited the uncertainty in the FCD back four and rode it all the way to a really important result for them to sort of find a foundation going forward.
Do they have I don't know what to make of them yet, Kyle, and it's still pretty early, but do they have enough in the tank? Do they have enough talent there? I mean, Dylan Powers is good, we know that. Dylan Cerna, they've got some defensive strength with O'Neal and the like. But they've now got a rookie striker up top who scored, Dominique Baji. Is there enough there?
Not yet. They're going to need to do some reinforcing in the summer transfer window. Of course, they've already got Kevin Doyle from Wolves coming in on a free transfer during the summer. But for the Rapids, it all starts with making the best use of the talent available. I don't think they did that in the first few games of the season. I think they're getting closer to it. I think the setup you saw on Friday was a little bit more conducive. I would still like to see Shane O'Neal in a lineup at some point, but you can't fault the experience that the Rapids have trusted to get that result in Frisco. So are the Rapids for real? I mean, I think it's a good result, and I think you have to treat it as a one-off, and then see what the Rapids do over the next few weeks.
Well, I mean, as you said, trusting the experience there, and certainly Pablo Mastroeni is a guy who is probably going to be pragmatic first. He's not going to be coming out and playing some super expansive soccer, and they've been pretty good defensively to start the year. Yeah,
no, they have a solid base at the back, which is good. They went out and made some intelligent additions during the offseason. Look at guys like Bobby Burling and Michael Harrington. Those are guys who understand what it takes to put together a decent defense in MLS. And they got Clint Irwin behind them. And there have been some strides in that side of the ball. And then that's been good for the Rapids. It's just a matter of finding that consistency going forward and being able to transition from when they win the ball to creating chances down the other end.
It seems to have taken the Rapids 6 weeks into the season to figure out how to score. As you said, they might have deserved some goals, but they weren't getting them. Meanwhile, you look at the New England Revolution and the Columbus Crew SC, and they can't score either, and that's not necessarily an expectation. What exactly about that game created a goalless situation?
It was two things. One, the conditions inside Gillette Stadium were awful, particularly in the first half. The wind was just atrocious, and that happens in spring in Foxborough. And two, you had two sides that were pretty familiar with what the other team wanted to do and did everything they could to really stop it. So you had Columbus with plenty of the ball and no incisiveness through the lines, and New England really struggled to find opportunities to get on the break and threaten the Crew because they couldn't get in behind the fullbacks. And once you get that sort of stasis, it becomes difficult to break it.
How long are we talking until New England is really at full throttle here with the injuries and getting everybody back into this lineup?
They need a few weeks to get everyone on the same page. It seems to be one thing after another. This weekend it was Chris Tierney who was out with an ankle injury, and his absence makes a big difference because he's their best set piece taker and their best crosser of the ball. So it's been a tricky start for the Revs. I think they've come through it all right. They managed to get some points, and I think it's going to be a few more weeks until everybody's firing.
Just let me take a twist on the Revs situation. Juan Agudelo gets a call up to the national team, Kyle, for that game on Wednesday night that you're covering in San Antonio. Is he really back? I mean, look, this is a special case. It's not a FIFA window. Josie Altidore is not available because of that red card. Is Agudelo back to that level, or we still need some time for him to recapture what he was doing with New England the last time around?
There are flashes that he can get back to that level. I think his movement has improved over the course of the season. I think you look at the goal he scored in Colorado last weekend, that's certainly a building block for him to take forward. But he needs games. He hasn't played a lot over the past year, and I think some of the sharpness that you're looking for at the international level will come for him over the next few weeks as he sort of settles in. But for Agudelo, there's an opportunity there. When you look at the forwards available to Jurgen Klinsmann at this point, there's a vacancy sign out front, and he can be a guy who helps fill that void. And the fact that he's in the squad to face Mexico on Wednesday gives him a chance to impress. Yeah, and he wants to take it.
It'll be interesting to see if he can jump ahead of guys like Rubio Rubin, who's still developing into the full player that he's going to be, but has been getting significant looks from Klinsmann. Obviously, as you said, the forward core, the forward pool, not super deep right now. Back to MLS. Let's talk about Philadelphia. They get a win over New York City FC. A late goal from Vincent Nogueira gets them that victory. They had a bloodied Sebastian Letou. Zach Pfeffer essentially scored with his backside. The Philadelphia needed this win pretty desperately, Kyle. I don't know if you saw it as a step forward in their play or just some bounces went their way.
Get the result and worry about everything else later. I think that's the important thing for the Union right now. And they also were able to get some steady ground between the sticks with McCarthy. There were a couple of hiccups here and there, but the Union were able to get through the game and get a late result. And that is critical for them, particularly in the way that they struggled at Kansas City a weekend ago to close out games. You need to find a way to get points when they're on the table, and Philadelphia was able to do that. There's still a lot of work to do at PPL Park, but Saturday was a good day for the Union.
And on the other side, I imagine that Jason Kreis is going to be none too happy that they went down 95 and couldn't at least get a point from that match. They seem to be a work in progress. Meanwhile, and we'll get to Orlando City and their win in Portland in a minute. When we compare those two teams, they're just not going to be naturally compared throughout the rest through the season. I certainly see Orlando having maybe stepped out ahead of New York City FC. When you look at NYCFC, what is it that stands out for you where they really need to improve in order to maybe even chase a playoff spot in sixth place?
They're going to need to reinforce the defense if they're going to be a playoff team. They're doing what they can with the pieces they've got right now, and it's worked out okay. But when you look at it from a pragmatic perspective, that's the first step. You have to go out and get a commanding center back who can really provide that solidity, and NYCFC just doesn't have it right now. So I think when you look at NYCFC, you're looking at a team that's good at keeping the ball, that has WD up front to provide that sharpness, but you want that leader at the back, the guy who is going to be able to really grab a game by the scruff of the neck and say, "Hey, we're closing it out. We're getting a point in PPL. Let's see out the game." And I'm not sure they have that yet.
I mean, you have a converted fullback in Chris Wingert who's playing in the middle. You obviously have Jason Hernandez, who's a longtime veteran. But I don't know that either one of those guys is where they need to be. We're talking about a dominant center back, or at least an MLS dominant center back to push them over the top.
Yeah, I think that's right. But that being said, 6 teams make the playoffs in the East, so everyone's going to be in the mix for a while, and it gives you plenty of time to figure it out, and see whether something will shake loose during the summer transfer.
You mentioned that 6 teams in the playoffs from each conference this season. Obviously, that's over half the league, and a very a large number, too large number for most of us. Do you think it's had an impact on the play? I mean, we got 2 scoreless draws this weekend with New England, Columbus, and Sporting Kansas City and RSL. And there's been enough of these games already that I think we're tired of them, and I think it's already approaching last year's single total. Is that partly down to the amount of room these teams have to work with when it comes to playoff places?
It might be. It might factor in to the game plans on some fundamental level, but I think the bigger picture is more influenced by the fact that a lot of teams just aren't firing on all cylinders. They're not in a rhythm yet. They're not producing the sort of soccer that they want to see, and that's really the brass tacks of it. It's not so much about, we're thinking about getting a point here or there. I mean, coaches always think about that, but you want to see teams really putting together good performances consistently, and we haven't seen a lot of that through the first 6 weeks of the season.
Yeah, certainly rhythm is difficult for a lot of reasons, not just the typical startup to the season, but you've had the international break to mess with things. Certainly injuries seem to be a problem. We're getting a lot of players. Clint Dempsey missed out for the Sounders last night. You had Aristeguieta missing out for the Union with a calf strain. These little injuries are popping off. David Villa's already missed a game. These little injuries are popping up. I don't know if there's a trend here to draw from, Kyle, but certainly that's got to be frustrating for coaches.
Well, it's certainly frustrating because the depth in the league is an issue. When you have rapid expansion and you have a salary cap that's less than $4 million a year, you're going to have some problems when your best players pick up knocks, and it extracts a toll on the quality of play. It's pretty evident that you can't compensate when those best players miss out on games. Look at what happened in Seattle and LA Galaxy last night. Clint Dempsey and Robbie Keane both out. And it was a decent game, but it never hit the heights that you would expect from those two teams, partly because the 2 best players that were supposed to be on the field weren't there. And MLS right now isn't in a position to compensate when its stars aren't on the field, and it's showing.
Yeah, certainly that game, and let's actually come to that game since you brought it up. I certainly thought that, as you said, it was an okay game. Obafemi Martins tried everything he possibly could to score on Jaime Pinedo, and it just wasn't working out. Lamar Nagel was fairly effective, but LA did what this to me. It seemed like a very Bruce Arena performance in the fact that they didn't have Robbie Keane. He made some adjustments. He throws Alan Gordon. He may not have an option, but Villarreal not ready. Throws on Alan Gordon. They become a bit of a direct Route 1 team, and they don't really need to stretch themselves in order to do that. I mean, they may be lucky to get the goal, Kyle, but in the end, that was very LA. Yeah,
LA needed a result, and they went out and got it, despite the fact that Robbie Keane was hanging out with Kurt Analfo and David Beckham up in the suites, and that was important for the Galaxy, and it was important for Jaime Pinedo, who has been a little up and down, has had a difficult start to the season in terms of getting that consistent form. For him to produce the display that he did last night, I think was good for him. Lamar Nagel is still, I'm sure, trying to score a header past Jaime Pinedo with the way that game unfolded last night.
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, LA needed that win pretty badly. Lots of things to happen through the rest of the season, but when you see LA scuffling the way that they have, you might wonder what's going to shake out in the West. Let's go to a team that was looking to get back into the Western Conference picture in terms of challengers, and that's the Portland Timbers. They lose to Orlando 2-0. From everything I've seen, and I watched a bit of that game, Kyle, that looked more like Orlando winning that game than Portland losing that game, and I think that's a surprise.
Orlando came in to Providence Park in absolutely dictated terms. Portland had no response to the way that City came out and established the tempo of the game and took control and possession. And it's peculiar to see a Timbers team so distant in that setting. Usually Portland can find a way to rally the troops and muster the energy to disrupt the opposition. It never happened yesterday. And Orlando City found a way to use its possession. They got a goal from Kyle Aaron, which was critical for them to get something from a front runner. And they just silenced the game professionally. They were by far the better team, and Portland simply had no answers.
And to give away the penalty the way that they did, and then to have the encroachment after the first attempt was saved, and Kaká gets another shot at it, it just completely took the wind out of their sails.
Yeah, and it sort of sums up how the afternoon went. They just were never in sync with what the game demanded, and part of that is Portland's desire to play a little more directly now without Diego Valeri. They're bypassing the midfield more regularly. But at the same time, you've got to engage in the game a little bit more than the Timbers did yesterday. They weren't good enough across the board, and it showed.
How much of that, and I've already gotten a little bit of stick, especially after they had a big win last week, Kyle, but how much of that do you put at Caleb Porter's feet? Because I'm all for coaches learning on the job and figuring things out, and maybe he has adjusted his philosophy to better suit the personnel he has available right now, certainly with Diego Valeri on the sideline. But not to have your team up and ready to play against Kaká, and you know it's going to be gritty at the back with Aurelian Collin. It just doesn't seem that Caleb's quite got a grasp on how to direct that club right now.
It's tough to make an assessment on that front with Valeri still on the sidelines. He makes all the difference for the Timbers, and I think you have to have some patience in Portland. The performances on the whole of the season haven't been good, but you need to really focus on the fact that there's an upside coming when you get Valeri back, and you have to see how that alters things. But certainly yesterday was not good at all.
Let me turn to the Houston Dynamo, 3-0 win over Montreal. Montreal has not looked, they haven't looked great. They've obviously had the Champions League to distract them. They're in the final, and I think that's maybe enough for them right now, Kyle. It's going to be difficult for them to kind of pay attention to both fronts with everything that they've got, and maybe Klopas will sacrifice on the league level. Is that a matter of a hangover for them? And look, I mean, obviously give Houston credit for finally getting back on the scoring sheet.
Yeah, I think it's more about Houston and what they were able to do. Getting goals after a frustrating trip to Seattle was important for the Dynamo. I think there have been some decent signs for Houston in the early stages of this season, but they haven't had enough end product. And to go out and get 3 goals, get a good performance from rookie Rob Lovejoy to really help seal the game in the late stages, I think it was a good step forward for the Dynamo.
It was a good day for rookie scoring this weekend with Baji, Kyle Larin, and Lovejoy. Let's turn to San Jose, 1-0 over Vancouver. A bit of a step back for Vancouver, who had kind of taken up that mantle as maybe the best team in the league at the moment, or playing the best anyway, and they go down to San Jose and lose. Sana Niasi with the goal. Vancouver are they just going to be prone to some of these dips every now and then, especially on the road?
Yeah, on the road, I think is the key. Every team in MLS is prone to dips. Every team is going to put out a couple of bad performances. That's just the nature of 34-game season, and Vancouver was not very good on Saturday. San Jose, for that matter, was not very good on Saturday. It was a bad game, but the Earthquakes managed to grind through it. They improved a little bit after halftime and found a way to get a goal through sheer persistence and found a Niasi. So it's one of those things where the Whitecaps expected more from this week. They weren't great against Columbus on Wednesday, but they got a point, and they certainly weren't good in San Jose on Saturday night. And Carl Robinson will have a quiet word with his players and say, look, hey, if we're going to be one of the best teams in the league, we've got to do a little bit better.
Speaking of potential one of the best teams in the league, maybe a little bit surprising how quickly it's kind of coalesced under Jesse Marsch in Jersey. The Red Bulls go down in D.C. and get a draw. Now, they needed, obviously, Bill Hamid to sort of spill a ball right in front of the net off of Sasha Kljestan free kick to get the point out of D.C., but that's not an easy trip for anybody. And I suppose you give D.C. United credit, certainly, for taking the lead late into that match, Kyle. But in terms of where the Red Bulls sit and where United sits relative to each other in terms of your expectations this year, does this game give you any information at all?
Not a ton. I think for the Red Bulls, it's a good point. It was a good comeback. It's a display of the character within the ranks to be able to issue a response immediately, going down for that second goal and then persisting to get the point. For United, I think it's been a lot of the same. They had that awful performance in Harrison, but they've leveled out over the past few weeks. You'd like to see United see out that game at 2-0 up, but I think it's pretty much same as for United right now.
Well, I mean, and they've obviously counted on Bill Hamid to bail them out. I'm not saying they lean on him more than any other team in MLS, but he's been pretty good. And to have him make that mistake again, you either want him to hold that ball, which even if that's difficult, he should be parrying it wide, not directly back in front of him. That's got to be a little bit of a gut shot. Now Hamid goes on international duty with that kind of stuck in his craw.
Yeah, I mean, it's out of character, certainly. But when you ask Hamid to do as much as he's had to do at points this year, these things happen. And it's the same thing with Tyler Derrick in Houston. He was asked to do far too much in the early stages of the season, and he had that terrible mistake against Orlando to cost the Dynamo points. These things happen when you ask a goalkeeper to do a lot, and it's no reflection on Bill Hamid, who has been fantastic and will respond to that sort of mistake, and that's just part and parcel of goalkeeping. So for United, it's a sign that they need to still improve a little bit from the run of play and really provide more of a foothold to relieve some of that pressure on the knee.
Last game that I've got here is Sporting Kansas City and RSL. They played to a goalless draw. Now, it probably wasn't nearly as bad as it looks on paper, but Sporting should have probably they should have gotten a goal. You could say that they deserved a goal. And meanwhile, RSL, and that's where I'll focus first, Kyle, doesn't seem to be generating a whole lot at the moment. And, maybe this is growing pains under Kassar and a shift in system. But if you're RSL and the fan base, are you a little worried about the lack of production?
Maybe a touch. But also have to factor in the circumstances on Saturday. They're going to Sporting Park to play against Sporting Kansas City, a team that's going to push numbers forward and press hot. The game plan at Sporting Park is always to soak up pressure and wait for the counter. And RSL did that for the most part. They didn't get the counter, certainly. They posed very little threat going forward, but they were able to do enough defensively to get a point. And that's what you expect when you go on the road in the conference. You have to keep a firm base first and foremost, and RSL did that. Now, do you want to create more chances? Absolutely. But you have to get João Plata back first and then see how that impacts things before you can truly assess them.
A bit of breaking news here. Michael Orozco has been dropped from the national team roster. I don't have that in front of me. Why? But he's been replaced by Perry Kitchen, just for anybody who might be interested in that news. So Perry Kitchen gets a call up to the U.S. national team ahead of Wednesday's friendly, where Kyle is covering that game. Kyle, before I let you go, there has been, I'm looking at Twitter and kind of following where the discussion is going this morning. We had that news yesterday that MLS has signed a deal with Coca-Cola to be the new soft drink sponsor, replacing Pepsi. I'm seeing a tweet here from somebody that says this is worth approximately $7 million more to the league than the Pepsi deal. And yet there's questions over where the salary cap is and where it's going. I know we have a CBA that's going to dictate those terms, but you just mentioned a problem with rapid expansion and the lack of depth. You may not be able to replace a Clint Dempsey and a Robbie Keane in that game, but if you have more money available, you should have better options off the bench.
Yeah, absolutely, but that's not necessarily MLS's first priority. I think if you're MLS, you're looking at the business perspective first. And if you have an opportunity during collective bargaining negotiations to reduce your overhead costs from what they were anticipated to be over the next few years, then you go ahead and take that. It's not like MLS is in a financial position where they can just spend money wantonly. They have to be prudent with how they approach things. And is it weird to juxtapose the fact that MLS has a sub $4 million salary budget every year with the fact that Coca-Cola is willing to pay high seven figures to sponsor the league? Of course it is. And I can understand the frustration. But MLS, as they will tell you, are a business first and foremost, and that goes into it, certainly.
Yeah. Well, I'm seeing conflicting things on Twitter. Again, don't trust Twitter. I got some tweet that's saying it's worth more to the league over the life of the deal, and then somebody else saying they're actually paying less annually than Pepsi did. Regardless, the point is that if MLS is going to be signing these deals, people are going to be calling for that salary cap to move up more in a quicker manner than we've seen it. And then again, if you're going to have this be at the same time as rapid expansion, I think that's where people's questions will be, Kyle, and we'll have to see, because MLS, for all of the gains that they've had, if we start to see a significant decline in the quality of the play, and I'm seeing it. I'm seeing some games that just don't look good. People are going to notice.
Absolutely, and it's important for diehard supporters to voice those concerns. And I think you see that every weekend. You see people who are invested in the league, who are concerned about the future, and who are saying, look, the quality hasn't been as good as you want it to be over the first 6 weeks of the season. And it's important to have that say. The issue, as always, is how do you balance that from MLS's perspective, where they're primarily focused on getting the bottom line right. Yeah. And that's a difficult course to chart. And one way you could see MLS address the situation somewhere down the line is to increase spending at the top end and find ways to funnel that money back into bigger name stars, perhaps adjusting the designated player rule, figuring out ways to spend in areas that aren't necessarily related to boosting the salary budget. But it's a lot of parlor talk. MLS just finished a collective bargaining negotiation, so it's certainly worth monitoring, especially if the quality of play continues as it has over the first 6 weeks.
We're out of time. Kyle J. McCarthy on Twitter, Inside MLS over at Fox Sports. Thanks for your time, Kyle. Enjoy the game on Wednesday night. Perhaps we'll get a chance to talk to you about USA Mexico at some point.
Sounds good, my friend. Thank you.
There goes Kyle McCarthy. Excellent as always. Let's take a break. When we come back, Jeff Kassouf from Equalizer Soccer will talk NWSL with us. Don't go anywhere. Be right back.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on World Soccer Talk with Jason Davis.
Here we go, back talking NWSL with Jeff Kassouf from Equalizer Soccer and other outlets. Jeff, how are you?
I'm great. The league is back, so busy weekends again.
Lots of things to talk about, lots of stuff from the opening weekend, sort of outlining the talking points ahead of our chat here. And you mentioned Seattle right off the bat and what they did to the Flash. Give me a I mean, it's week one. We don't want to make any grand conclusions yet, and yet I get the sense that Seattle is just going to be one of those teams throughout the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that they're a team that, as much as anybody, carried over the talent that they had last year, and they're not going to lose almost anything. Obviously, Hope Solo and net, but most of that team will be around for the entirety of the season, and it won't be lost to the World Cup. So, carrying over what they did last year, a record unbeaten run, really just steamrolling the entire league up until that championship game. They're going to be a team that's going to be scary again this year.
And Megan Rapinoe with a hat trick for the Reign. And where's the strength in this team? And maybe if you can give me a sense of what you saw from the Flash, and is this going to be a theme for them? Is it just they hit a buzzsaw here in the Reign, but are they going to have struggles through the rest of the season?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be growing pains for the Flash. They're a young team. They only brought back, their roster only consists of 4 people who actually played for the team last year because they hit a little bit of adversity and had a house cleaning. So, I think that they're going to take some time to progress. They're going to take some time to really start hitting all cylinders. And unfortunately for them, they had to play their opener against probably the best team in the league away across the country on a day that, some things went Seattle's way. I mean, Megan Rapinoe was great. She's not usually a presence in the air, scoring twice from her head. So a lot of things clicked for Seattle, and it was just, an unfortunate case of Flash need time, and they happened to debut against a great team.
And going across the country, as you said, I can't imagine that's a very easy thing. And we see it in sports all the time, going across the continent here. In travel, I guess we don't talk a lot about it in WSL, but it's certainly a factor. The Portland Thorns also with a big win, and in the score line there, 5-1 for the Reign, 4-1 for the Thorns. We're not going to see a big separation and a lot of big score lines this year, are we?
I think anything can happen during this World Cup. I mean, I think that you're going to see a lot of amateur players in June, some of July, and we're seeing them already. So there's going to be some unpredictable games here in the sense that you're going to have a lot of people who are, for lack of a better word, no names in a sense, that are stepping into big roles, which I think can bring, some shockingly, lopsided results, or it can bring some unlikely heroes. So I think that lopsided results could be a theme here, especially with a couple of teams where I think Boston's going to really struggle this year. Like I said, the Flash will have to take some time. They're not going to lose 5-1 every time by any means. I think that they'll get their feet under them and find some consistency. But there could be some lopsided results, especially in June.
And as you said, the unpredictability this season with the Women's World Cup coming up and everything else. If you like your leagues, if you like your sports to be, I have no idea what's going to happen. NWSL might be your game this season. Let's talk some more about winners here. Houston actually opened up the season on Friday with a 2-0 win over the Spirit. Give me a sense of what we can expect from the Dash in year 2.
Well, the Dash were really impressive on Friday, more impressive than I would have guessed, actually. And I think the problem for them is going to be that they were largely in part with their internationals in town. I mean, Carly Lloyd, first goal of the season for the entire league was an absolute rocket. And, obviously she's going to be there another week or two, and then she'll be gone until, likely mid-July. So the Dash, very impressive start, but I think the problem for them is going to be depth, especially in the back. They're already playing converted forwards in the back, and converted forwards who they literally converted a week or two ago. So they're going to be stretched thin. They'll probably give up a good amount of goals, and for them a pretty good debut in the sense that the Spirit, also a team that are sort of still figuring themselves out, and the Dash bringing in Carly Lloyd, Morgan Bryan, Megan Klingenberg for these first few weeks is really helpful for them, but could be a team that in the long run here come September may struggle.
Well, bad news for this for the Spirit. Ali Krieger with a concussion, a head injury. This obviously was not a good moment. Is there any prognosis yet? I know she traveled with the team back to Washington, but is there a sense that this is going to be something that's going to linger and potentially affect her national team play?
I mean, I think there's always the unfortunate potential that this kind of a thing could linger. I mean, we see it with so many players. I mean, she gave a pretty positive update. She tweeted out a few things, and the Spirit have done so as well, was saying it was, a mild concussion, and she's going through the protocol, and she herself wrote that she's feeling better. But I mean, I think this is one of those things that. Friday could come and she could be listed as questionable, and who knows, the next Friday could come and she could be listed as questionable. So I think it's probably it's too early to panic in the sense that could this be a problem come June? I don't necessarily think so, but I mean I don't think any of us really know when it comes to a head injury and one that was that ugly. I mean, that was a scary moment. I mean, she was in the neck brace, she was strapped in. It didn't look good. So where exactly she is in terms of returning to full contact, I think is going to be a wait-and-see game.
Back to the results. The defending champs, FC Kansas City, lose to Sky Blue FC. This when it comes to unpredictability, and we sort of identified, who the good teams are so far, but with a sense that things can change pretty quickly. FC Kansas City, what kind of likelihood is there that they may be able to actually defend their title?
Oh, I think it's pretty strong likelihood. I mean, I think that they're certainly a playoff team and full strength, which they more or less were yesterday. And are pretty unfortunate for them, the result. But I think at full strength, they're, again, probably top two. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see a rematch of last year's final come September. I think Seattle showed that, and Kansas City probably showed some of that on Sunday without the actual scoreline. But yeah, I mean, this is, we mentioned it already, but this league, the parity in it, Sky Blue didn't do a lot to deserve that result necessarily. I think both coaches more or less said as much after the match, but, Nadia Nadim is proven to be a game changer again, and Kansas City, it'll be something to keep an eye on because 2013 and some parts of 2014, Kansas City's one Achilles heel was just not finishing games. And that's what we saw in week one here. So too early to say that it's carried over by any means, but it's something to keep an eye on for sure for the Blues.
Well, how's the, for people who are obviously going to be focused in on the Women's World Cup this summer and looking at the U.S. women's national team specifically, but we know this is a league that was built on the idea of Canada, the U.S., and Mexico all throwing players into the pot and trying to make a go of a professional women's league that would last. What's the balance of international players? I mean, you look at Nadim, just for example, the balance of international players who are going to be around or won't be around. You've already identified some of the amateur stuff. I guess what I'm getting to, Jeff, is are we going to have an extremely large disparity in the talent levels that are on the field when we get to June?
I think that there will be a decent amount of that. I mean, look, there will be internationals like a Nadim who, I think Nadim has the potential to be one of the best players in the league this year from the standpoint of who she is and what she does, as well as the fact that she'll be here all year.
Right.
You look at these U.S. players, they'll be here for another couple weeks, and then they're off to camp on May 1st, and you may not see them again for at least 2 months. And there'll be similar things there with, all the other national team players. Canada will be a big drop-off. So I think that you will see a huge disparity. Like I said, the amateurs already being called upon. Some of these players who, unless you're really, really inside baseball and women's soccer, that they're names that you've just never heard of, and maybe gone to schools that you've never even heard of, that are stepping on the field and maybe going up and having to defend a Nadia Nadim. So I think there will be a disparity. It gets even more interesting when you look at the fact that these are amateurs who aren't paid. There's going to be a wide range of talent, and that's sort of been every coach has approached it differently in terms of what they want to or how they wanted to build their team. Some of them have gone completely away from internationals. They want a core group. Some of them have tried to still rely upon them and know that they'll make a second half surge when they all get back in July. So how those play out will be interesting to see.
Do you have any names? I mean, you can throw Nadim obviously out there, but do you have anybody else that people should be looking for when the U.S. internationals go away on May 1st, when the Canadian internationals go away, when some of these other big names leave? Who should we be looking for? I mean, again, it's going to be interesting to see how even the play is, considering the amateurs involved and some of the level. But are there women, are there girls out there, are there women out there who you know are going to have to be stars and going to have to carry their teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of them are names that maybe those semi-familiar with the league have seen from last year. I mean, look, Seattle again, to come back to them, not really losing any of their field players to the World Cup. So, Kim Little, MVP last year, who I think, I mean, she wasn't on the ballot because whatever for FIFA World Player of the Year, but she should have been. She was that good, and she'll be here the entire season because Scotland failed to qualify. Her midfield partner there, Jess Fishlock, is Welsh, and Wales failed to qualify. So a lot of these Seattle midfielders that have been spectacular will be here the entire year, and I think that'll be a big thing that'll carry the reign. And you'll see these sort of, I don't know if mid-level is a fair way to put it. Almost maybe the group of snubs, maybe a fair way to put it, of players that, a whole nother topic of maybe should have some U.S. caps or call-ups that don't, and they're sort of on that cusp, like, a Becky Edwards, a Jen Buskowski, even an Allie Long getting in and out of camps, that, these players who are sort of on the cusp haven't really gotten a look and maybe part of the next cycle somehow, I think are players that are really going to break out this year.
We can't get away from the health of the league as being a talking point, Jeff. It's just going to be a thing until the NWSL, and we all hope this is true, is 10 or 12 or 15 years in.
Okay.
How was the opening weekend from a business perspective?
I think it varied. I think the attendance in Houston was good. I know that they were happy with it. The Dash and Dynamo folks there, playing in Sporting Park for Kansas City on Sunday was good to see. I think the crowd was pretty good, about 8,500. So, in Sporting Park that looked okay and, sounded okay. And I'm sure that, something to build upon for more games in that building. The Seattle crowd, a bit concerning. I know there's some weather stuff there, but, given the quality and everything, I know it was up against the, same time as the Sounders being on the road, and, there's all these factors. So I think, generally there's certainly nothing to look at and say, well, this is the sign of the end or anything. But, I think there's some positive signs. That there's all this chatter of expansion, which we sort of, as everything adds up, we see that, I talked to Commissioner Jeff Plush, and he said there's 6 expansion candidates, and, we sort of have independently, myself and Dan Laletta and some others have sort of identified individually these markets, and then you hear that 3 are on the West Coast, and then you hear that 3 are MLS clubs, and you sort of narrow down maybe who they are. So, I think the expansion talk is good, and we'll see. I would say what I've been saying is, of the 3 leagues, that as much as this is backing into it, it's the least scary of the 3 going in the year 3. So
certainly a benefit. Last thing, it came to me while we were talking about this World Cup and the impact it's going to have on the league. When you said these amateurs are coming in, they're going to play. Now, imagine that for a lot of them, that's a matter of they got to keep their eligibility for the NCAA But is there anything wrong with that from your perspective? There's certainly not going to be a legal argument that they have to be paid if they're choosing to play as amateurs, but it just doesn't seem exactly right.
No, some folks have raised that, and frankly, it's something that I think myself and others should look into a bit more, for sure. Is that there are issues there with FIFPro, as I understand it, in terms of the sanctioning of the league and the level of the league being that that full-time D1 and using amateurs who aren't getting paid. So there's something a bit wrong about it, and I actually shameless plug kind of deal. We just put out something in long form on NBC on Friday on sort of, even the ones who are getting paid are making $6,000 a year. And, that's another conversation of, how do you live off of it? And there's those realities of it. But there are some things that I think are just growing pains. I think MLS fans can relate to them, to the days when, developmental players were making their $12,500 or whatever it was. And it was, that was only 8 or 10 years ago. So I think there's parallels there. And, the use of amateur players, I think, is quietly contentious in terms of how they are being dealt with and just relied upon so heavily and not getting paid, obviously.
Certainly something to watch. Make sure you check that out, that piece over at NBC Sports. Jeff Kassouf, also at equalizersoccer.com. Thanks for your time as always, Jeff. Enjoyed it. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much, Jason.
Right, there you go. Let's take a break. When we come back, we will open up those phone lines. Get your thoughts on anything and everything. 646-832-3909. Be right back.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on World Soccer Talk with Jason Davis.
Back on Soccer Morning, phone lines open 646-832-3909. Lots of discussion again going on over how MLS is supposed to improve the quality of play, certainly the television ratings, because those have to get better in order for MLS to get where it wants to be. Every time Don Garber opens his mouth and says, we want to be a top league in the world by 2022, we all chuckle a little bit and go, how? How exactly do you intend to get there? When you sign deals with Coke, that's great. Coca-Cola's on board. All right, fantastic. Especially if Pepsi's moved on. And again, I'm not quite sure if this deal is worth more or less than the Pepsi deal. I don't know that it's either here nor there. There are plenty of new sponsorships that MLS is garnering that indicate that there is money to be made from these companies interested in the target demographics that MLS can boast. But in order to grow and get where you want to be, meeting that goal of 2022, you're going to have to improve the quality of the product, improve the television ratings, and again, put more money back into the system. And I do think it's important to note, every single time that we talk about money in MLS, we have to remember how much money went down the drain between the years of 1996 and 2007, 2008, 2009. We're not talking about a league. And they still, obviously MLS still claims to be in the red. That certainly was the talking point during the CBA negotiations. We're still in the red. We're not making any money. This is a league that is still $100 million, down, blah, blah, blah. And I think people don't want to believe this. And yes, there are different ways that you can account for the money spent on MLS now, spent on MLS 15 years ago. You have to ask yourself, and I think this is a question of how much you put on the game, how much your loyalty is to the game, and how much your loyalty is to your rationale is that the people involved in the game, the people who put that money down the drain back in 2000, well, they deserve to get their money back. Typically, sports ownership, certainly soccer ownership, is not a money-making proposition. Owners don't go into this business to make a bunch of money, at least not year over year. They're not looking at, hey, we got some money coming in. We're running a surplus this year. I'm taking that money out, putting it in my pocket. First of all, the fans don't like that. Definitely not in Europe. Put the money back into the team. And if you're an owner, the goal, I suppose, if you want to look at it as an investment, is that the value of your team goes from whatever you paid for it to something much, much higher. So when you sell it, you're making out. Is the salary cap too low? I'm not sure you're going to find anybody who doesn't think that the salary cap is too low. Do these sponsorships that MLS is getting from Coke and Audi and who else? There's more out there I'm missing. American Express, somebody, right? Do those directly impact your thoughts on the salary cap? Does the $90 million TV deal impact your thoughts on the salary cap? You could argue, I'm not making this argument, but you could certainly see it this way, and this is definitely how MLS is viewing it, that they got to get up to a certain level. They got to balance some things out before they can jump ahead, start throwing money at the cap. I want the cap to grow because I want the league to get better. And as I said to Kyle McCarthy, you look at the expansion that we've had, whatever the reasons are, logically it looks like it's because of expansion, it's because of depth issues, because of injuries. But you look at what's going on, and you wonder about the quality. You wonder if we can keep it going. Let's get to Mark Fishkin on the line from Seeing Red here on Backheel.com. Hey, Mark, what's going on?
What's going on with you? I'm enjoying the conversation a lot, especially with the word of the new Coke deal. I think what everyone has to consider is over the last few years. You talk about development academy teams. You talk about now entire USL teams, which by and large, I guess if you're not in the Pacific Northwest, are really just a development expense, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, here is an entirely second new team for some of these clubs that is going to generate almost no revenue. Mm-hmm. And that has to be thrown into the mix as well. I mean, we know that Don has said a number of times, we're spending X percent more on player development than, we spent more last year than we spent in the last 10 years. Yeah, and I kind of have to believe that.
I think that's true, Mark. Just let me chip in here. I think that what's interesting is to consider is that for a lot of fans, this is hidden money. This is not money that we see out in the, again, a salary, especially because the Players Union releases these numbers, is a very public thing that we can see. Oh, these guys he's making 100, he's making 250, this guy's making $6 million. We don't know exactly. We can only take the league's word on it that they're spending $25 million on development or whatever the number is right now. It almost doesn't matter. And that they're putting forth this money into the USL programs to get you got to run the team. You got to send them places. You got to feed them. Obviously some of these guys are senior level players who go down for a bit, but a lot of them aren't. They're USL contracts, and the teams are running these clubs now. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and I don't necessarily have a dog in the in the owners versus players fight. I think everyone wants to see better paid American talent. And I think everybody wants to see more DPs brought in, because when you think about what's going to attract a national television audience, it's not necessarily going to be the DeAndre Yedlins of the world, right? When he comes to town or on national TV, I've got to see that kid who's a product from a local development academy, but they want to see named players that may be global soccer names, and that's what's going to draw more eyeballs to a match. And so you'd like to see some of the new sponsorship money funneled, frankly, if the goal is more TV ratings, to go ahead and grab more of those named players almost exclusively.
Yeah, I got to move on, Mark. Appreciate the phone call. Mark Fishkin from Seeing Red. You should be listening to that podcast. It's Red Bull's focus, but it's pretty good. Any MLS fan can get something out of it. Mark, thanks a lot.
Yep, thank you.
All right, I got to move on here. Let's go to Jerry in Rhode Island. Wants to talk about this MLS situation. I'm not sure if he's talking about this week or what, and the San Jose Earthquake Stadium. What's up, Jerry?
Hey, well, not just this week in general, but it ties into the whole revenue discussion, because for the first time this weekend, I was able to watch a San Jose match with their new stadium, which is fantastic, honestly. But I did have a problem with it in a way, and it's mainly come to the that bar that they have set up at the stadium.
Jerry, the world
itself, I know the world looks great and everything, but I feel like it completely destroys the atmosphere in that stadium.
Maybe it does.
I was watching it, and people were milling about the entire time. It was just really strange. I don't know. I feel like a lot of owners in this league do things to make more money. I'm sure they're making a killing off of it, but it just doesn't strike me as a soccer atmosphere.
Well, look, it's a little Jerry. It's a little gimmicky, right? I mean, and I think that these owners and these teams have a balancing act that they have to pull out. They have to go, okay, how much can we just count on the fact that we've got a new stadium and our team is going to win enough games to get people? Is that enough, or do we need to throw a gimmick in here? Do we need the world's longest outdoor bar in San Jose? And maybe they didn't believe enough in their product, or maybe they just thought from a business perspective that's the right way to go. I can see what you're saying, though. It certainly is an issue. And when it comes to the revenue issue here, and we're talking about obviously MLS and what kind of investment they need to make, and this again comes to what you're talking about. And I'm not picking on you, Jerry, but I do think that as American soccer fans now and as MLS fans, we've seen so many advancements, we've seen so much growth, we've seen so many stadiums, we've seen so much DPs with big names coming into this league. We're greedy as hell. We are greedy as we want everything to be exactly the way we want it. We want the salary cap to be tripled. We want our stadiums to be exactly the way that they should be. We want, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And in fact, if we're not greedy, then the league stagnates and doesn't go anywhere. But I'm just pointing it out, Jerry.
Yeah, no, it's fair. It's fair, but we're all pining for the best league that we can possibly have. But I just feel like it's strange, because like when another night I watched that CONCACAF Champions League match in Costa Rica, and I understand, like, we don't want to have an atmosphere where people are throwing batteries or bags of pee or something like that. But like, it just doesn't seem like I don't see any atmosphere in the league, even like say Portland or Seattle, where there's great support, but you don't really feel like everybody's invested in a way. You know what I mean? There's no scary atmosphere in MLS.
I think that look, I don't know if I want scary. I'm okay with the way Seattle and Portland do it. Thanks for the call, Jerry. I do think that look, we're in a modern sports age, and this is going to be a situation where sometimes people just aren't going to be as invested as the diehard fans want them to be. This happens at every sporting event in this country. NFL, Major League Baseball, hockey. You have casuals, you have tourists. They're not buying in. They're just there to have a nice day out at the park or at the rink or at the basketball, the arena, whatever it is, to be seen or to look around and look. People walk. It's fine. It's fine. Let's all calm down. Rick in Philly wants to talk about Eduardo Galeano. What's up?
Hey, Jason. I missed the beginning of the show, so I don't know if you already brought this up, but I mean, it's a huge loss for literature, and it's a huge loss, I think, for soccer. Most people talk about serious books about soccer, artistic books about soccer, and they bring up Nick Hornby as being the beginning of it, but it's really Galliano and his descriptions of matches in Soccer and Sun and Shadow are one of the things that really drew me to the sport in the first place. It's sort of an odd thing to call about, but when I was in college, my minor was Latin American history, and one of my professors gave me the stack of Galliano books, and I didn't get to Soccer and Sun and Shadow until I had actually graduated. And it just changed my perception of everything about the sport, about what was happening on the field, about the players, about the fans and their interaction. It's just a tremendous loss.
Certainly worth noting the passing of Eduardo Galliano, Uruguayan writer. And as you said, Rick, I grew up before soccer became my overriding passion. I grew up a baseball guy, and baseball has a tradition of that sort of lyrical, evocative writing, the magic of the game, the romance of the game, and this is why Soccer and Sun and Shadow is on my list, and I need to get to it, is because I think soccer lends itself. This is the connection for me. I don't know if this is a connection for anybody else, but the connection between baseball and soccer for me is the history of the two sports, the working class roots, and again, the way that those games, for different reasons, lend themselves to that romance. It's good to mark his passing. Thank you, Rick.
Yeah.
Anything else? No, he's gone. I lost Rick. He jumped out. Didn't want to talk about his Union winning a game. Didn't want to talk Ajax. Only wanted to talk about Eduardo Galliano, which again is fine, absolutely fine. At 74 years old, Galliano has passed away. All over Twitter, people are sending out their thoughts on this. Let me get back to Twitter here. Coleman on Twitter. More MLS DPs equals more immediate viewership, but it's best idea for growing quality of the product, play on the field, and the brand long term. Is it the best idea? This is the multi-million / billion-dollar question ultimately for MLS. This is what the whole thing comes down to with the strategic thinking of the league. This is why so much of our focus, and I mentioned that Simon Evans piece over at World Soccer Talk last week. Go read it. So much of the focus is on the way we do the sport and not just the sport itself. Soccer's not going anywhere, people. We're not going anywhere. We're going to be here. We're going to talk about this game. We're going to love this game. We're going to watch this game. We're going to watch the goals. We are here. Soccer is here. The league isn't going anywhere. And yet there are still so many questions as to how to get where we want it to be. And if you are the type of person who wants to see MLS become a top league in the world, and honestly, maybe I'm boring for this. I'm just glad it's here. I'm glad I get to watch it every weekend. Yeah, I do root for the league to get better. And I root for all of American soccer to get better. But ultimately, come a long way already. I don't know. It's the question. How much do you give? How much do you give over to those marquee names because they grab people's attention, and how much do you put into the bottom level? How much infrastructure do you spend on? What do you do exactly to make sure? Because guess what? That is not a guaranteed thing. You can put all the money you want into the academies. You can put all the money you want into your developmental systems, into getting your USL Pro team to start producing senior level talent that's going to come in, be ready to play. You could do all of those things and still fail at it. You can still fail. So I think MLS sees this, certainly from a business perspective. I'm playing devil's advocate here. The owners in that room, the people in charge of directing that strategy go, if we spend $6 million on this player, $8 million on this player, $5 million, $4 million, $3 million, if we do that, we're going to get more people in the stadium. We're going to sell more tickets. We'll get more eyeballs on our television product. We'll get more money into the system, and we can continue to grow. But if you try to sell them, and again, this is about the game itself. Try to sell them on putting a bunch of money into an academy, into a youth team, into those kinds of things. They can't see the return right away. It's much easier to see the return on a DP than it is on a homegrown talent. There are only so many DeAndre Edlins. There are only so many Andy Nahars. They don't come around that often. And I think it's a tough sell. So when the question is it better long term? What's best for the league long term? I don't know. I don't know, because I could make the argument right now. The more you spend on those big names, the more money you get into the system. And you can continue to, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. Yeah, you're taking some money out of pot A to put it into pot B or vice versa. But there are lots of ways to tackle this issue. Jason on Twitter, unless foreign slots change, the ceiling for MLS will always be the quality of U.S. player pool. Player development is key. They could make a change to those foreign player slots. Absolutely, they could do that. And I think that in the short term, that might be the way to go. If you are suffering from a deficit of depth, now obviously the foreign player costs more than the American player. We know that. We know why. So you better up the salary cap. That's, you could argue that this league should be for MLS, or for American players, for Canadian players. And yet, in order to keep the league at that quality level that we've become accustomed to, and things have gotten better over the last 5 years, you better reinvigorate the player pool. And how do you do that exactly? You can't turn out a bunch of top-level professionals from the academies that are 5 years old. You continue to invest there, but you're going to have to go outside of these borders to find the players who are going to help MLS stay good. That's the question here. All right, just a couple of minutes left. 646-832-3909. I got some stuff to do today. I got to run. We have any callers lined up? Am I missing anybody yet? Lots of things to talk about from the weekend. Nobody's mentioned yet the Manchester Derby. Haven't seen that. Patrick on Twitter, can MLS use some or all of this sponsorship money for some new refs? This weekend was awful. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, can we get some new refs in here? Are these guys full time yet? Refereeing is like my least favorite thing to talk about. I know it's a problem. I know it needs addressing. I think Pro is trying. What that means exactly, I don't know. But I hate talking about referees because when they ruin games, it's just so sad. It brings me down. When they hand out yellow cards or red cards or penalties that change games, and it's not even about that, really. I mean, a referee can have an awful game and never hand out any questionable call with a card or a penalty. Just fouls can be questionable. Fouls can change the rhythm of a game and wreck anything that might be entertaining about it. That's an issue too. Garrett on Twitter says that we need a coffee sponsorship. I don't have my mug with me this morning. Didn't get a chance to grab it. Suggest Tim Hortons or Dunkin' Donuts. Those are the big ones, right? Is there anybody else? I mean, I guess Starbucks, whatever. Starbucks not putting money into soccer. Coleman says that MLS is banking on the American public not being able to unequivocally identify quality soccer and wanting to sugar it up to gain views. I don't know that's necessarily true. I don't think it's interesting to consider that you have competing interests here between the notion of whether or not the owners want to put together teams to win games, or they want to curry an MLS quality up the ladder overall. Are those things can they coexist? Exactly right. Exactly. I mean, look, Merritt Paulson may want to go win the Champions League, and in order to do that, he's going to need better players, more money. But he also probably wants to see the quality of the league go up overall. So when he goes into that room and he sits down and says, we need to spend more money, do those other owners agree with him on that front? And again, we've seen that we talked about the split perhaps that may or may not be there. Let's go to Alex in Brooklyn. What's up?
Hi, this is Alex from Brooklyn. I just wanted to talk about the MLS revenue.
Sure.
I think a lot of it has been made up the Coke deal, but they've also been getting revenues from the Sky Sports deal.
Sure.
And that's going into the Middle East and the new Brazil TV deal. So,
well, yeah, those aren't big dollars, Alex. I mean, relatively speaking, I'm not saying they're not consequential on some level, but let's not act like signing a deal to get MLS on late night in England or Britain with Sky Sports or on television in Brazil is somehow going to.
Well, I'm not saying it's big dollars, but the thing is, I feel my personal opinion is that it should be at least $5 million, and right now is at 3.7 something.
Yeah.
Well, tell me that is a big jump from 3.7 to 5 is like a $1.3 million difference. So what's
okay? Look, Alex. Look. It is a lot of money. Obviously, so it's a lot of money for me. If somebody wants to improve, give me a raise of that amount, I'll take it in a second. But
it's for an entire team.
No, I know that, David. And Alex, what I'm saying though is that it's sort of an arbitrary thing. We pick these numbers out of thin air. We say, all right, the league, the salary cap needs to be this amount. It needs to be that amount. The problem, I think, is that until MLS is flat out on a level competing with the leagues that are sort of in its orbit, meaning Liga MX, certainly, meaning some of the South American leagues, Argentina, Brazil, until MLS is on that level, maybe even like competing with the big teams in Colombia, places like that. It's not going to matter. It's not going to matter.
You cannot compete without the investment.
No. But what I'm saying, Alex, is that it's arbitrary to say that the league. I'm not saying the salary cap shouldn't go up, and the quality should go up with a salary cap increase. But teams need to be investing in scouting and player identification, in putting together a system that works for their teams. All of these things are variables that come into play when you talk about the quality of the league. And for us to put an arbitrary number, thanks for the call, David. Alex, I'm going to let you go. If you put an arbitrary number on the salary cap and just say, it needs to be $5 million. Well, why exactly? I mean, I think it's fine to identify that. But what exactly is that supposed to, like, how many players is that? How much quality is that? Lots of questions to answer. No easy ones either. All right, let's get this show wrapped up. Thank you very much to our guests today, Kyle McCarthy and Jeff Kassouf. Make sure you go to 30fc.com to buy a t-shirt and backheel.com/store to get yourself a mug. My voice is going out and I literally got to run. I got stuff to do. Thank you very much for listening, guys. We'll talk to you tomorrow, Big Tuesday episode of the program. See you then.